Great, we are live. So we're going through the laws of the Torah Scroll, and as we see, this concludes a section on Torah study. Please God, from tomorrow we will be beginning a new section which is about proper conduct. I will share a flyer which I would like to encourage you to share with all of your family and friends. Encourage whoever would like to join in So we are in the section of Torah study, and specifically Torah scrolls and books. We spoke about the mitzvah to write a Torah, the mitzvah to purchase Torah books, honoring the Torah, having it in a respectable place, and bearing the Torah respectably. We spoke about also how any holy writings need to be disposed of, and about not acting in a way that is undermining or disrespectful in front of the Torah. And finally, we come up to section number 9. Now, at the end of last week, I mentioned that I had a story that I wanted to share, and I said we'd run out of time, and I'd share with you today. It's not really a long story, but it's an anecdote which relates to the end of this halacha number 8. He says that you're not allowed to use pre-existing materials as a cover for the Torah. If it was already made, then you could use it. But material that was used for idolatrous purposes certainly would not be allowed to be used for a Torah. So this reminds me of the story of the Baba that, sorry, one moment. Sorry, a slight internet connection, of the Baba that had so diligently hand knit this precious mantle, this precious cover for the Torah. And when they put it on the Torah, they realized that they had an issue, that it was too short. Now, they didn't want to hurt her feelings because she had worked so hard on this mantle. So a decision was made that they would cut the Torah to size so that it could fit with the mantle. Hopefully the story never happened, but this story demonstrated how certainly we wouldn't be allowed to change the Torah or cut the Torah short in order to be to somebody's convenience. Even if there are hard feelings involved, we try to be sensitive towards everybody, but the Torah certainly needs to be given the highest level of respect. And so this is just relevant in this halacha that we just read, halacha 8, which spoke about not using pre-existing materials, but rather making a special mantle, a special cover, especially for the Torah. Let's move on to halacha tes, section 9. Okay, it is forbidden to use, so we spoke about a Torah, now we're talking about books as well. And we're saying that it's forbidden to use religious books for personal benefit. This is something which sounds like, why would somebody ever do it? But actually, unfortunately, this can happen very easily and very often. So, for example, to stand it up as a screen against the sun, also that someone else does not see what you are doing. You want to hide behind the books. But if the sun shines on the book you are studying, then you may use another book as a screen. Why? Because you're not doing this for your enjoyment, but rather to help you learn. Likewise, to place a book underneath the book you are studying in order to raise it for easier study may be permitted. So this is very practical. If you come to shul and you want to put a siddur under the back of the other siddur to put it on an angle so that you could see, that would be allowed because it's not for personal benefit, but it's rather for the learning. It's not permitted to place one book inside another so that you don't have to look for the place later. I did not see that in the Mishnah Brura, which was a text I was using to prepare today. And I have seen it being done. So I think that this might be up for debate, because if you're putting one book and another book to help you find it later, it is for the benefit of learning. So I guess I would need to get back to you on this one. I'm not, although the Shulchan Aruch says it is not permitted, I think that's debatable. Here's an interesting one. You shouldn't draw lines on a note paper in order to write a commentary on the Torah by placing the paper on the book. So if you want to write down some notes on a piece of paper and you want to have a flat surface to put the paper down on, so you say, I'll put the paper down on the siddur that I have in front of me so that it acts as a soft flat surface to ride on. So that also is not allowed because you are using the siddur for personal benefit. Even if you're planning on writing Torah, if at this point you're just drawing the lines and you actually haven't started writing the Torah itself, it would be inappropriate. So the general point of this whole halacha is not using books, a siddur, a chumash, anything of that sort for personal benefit in order as a stand or to lean on or anything like that. We did mention this earlier in the chapter and we're mentioning it now again, this concept. Because the note paper is not sacred until something sacred is written on it. Neither are you allowed to put note paper or something similar into a book for safekeeping. Also something that I see often done. If somebody maybe has a few tissues that they're holding on to and they don't want to have a million things in their hands. So what you do is you just open up your siddur and you just put a few tissues in and you hold it. And then you go to shul and you have the siddur in your hand and the siddur, the tissues are in place. That wouldn't be allowed. Again, the siddur is holy and therefore you wouldn't be allowed to use it to hold something that's not holy. Okay.
I've got a question there.
Yes.
Okay, you said you can't use this a piece of note paper or something, even if it's to find your...
I have to pay my rent.
Sorry, 1 second. Yes, Terry. 1 second, I lost you, Terry. A second. Go for it.
Okay, you can't put something into the book even so that you remember where your place is. But let's say we're studying the book that we're studying now, and I want to put a bookmark that is literally designed for this purpose, but it's got writing on it. Is this allowed?
Absolutely, because you would be able to use anything for that purpose because it's there servicing your learning. The idea we were speaking about was using a book as a bookmark for another book. And even that, I said that although he says it's not permitted over here, I think that's actually debatable because it is there to help you learn. So that certainly wouldn't be a problem to use a bookmark.
Okay.
Wrong with that. Okay. Moving on to number 10. Whoever destroys sacred writings violates one of the 630 mitzvahs, which says, do not act in this manner to Hashem your God. So Hashem instructs us to destroy idols, but don't do that towards Hashem. So if something is a book of Torah or a siddur or any piece of paper that has Torah written on it, it is holy and it may not be destroyed. We must protest against those bookbinders who paste sacred writings in the book covers. This is actually something that's unfortunately existed by the Holocaust as well. And throughout time, we find that our anti-Semites would dafka, or either dafka or just carelessly take holy verses, sections of holy writings, because we have so many books, and use it for the binding. So one needs to be very careful when giving old sacred books to a non-Jewish binder. So if you're asking him to fix up your book and redo it correctly, so if he's taking off the old binding and he's putting on a new binding, that old binding needs to be buried because it was connected to the siddur. So you got to make sure to collect that. You can't keep that old binding and now use that in order to bind a non-holy book. So that's something to be cognizant of. You should remove the old covers and hide them so that the bookbinder will not install them in secular books. Is that clear? Yes. Number 11. It is forbidden to buy a Torah or tefillin or mezuzahs from a non-Jew for more than their true value. Why not? In order not to encourage them to steal and rob them. Since we mentioned at the beginning of this chapter that Torahs, for example, are not for sale. You can't buy a Torah. You need to commission somebody to write a Torah. So chances are that if a non-Jew has a Torah, then we're quite concerned that it may have come in some illegal manners, because these are things that really shouldn't be floating around in the markets. And therefore, you shouldn't pay more than their value. I mean, soon we'll see that you shouldn't pay less than their value either. So you might say, he has a Torah. A Torah is so holy. I'll pay whatever it costs to get it back. But ultimately, we could be causing more Torahs to be stolen. So that's a quite a logical one. This also related, by the way, there's a similar halacha that one should not pay extra money for a hostage. Sounds crazy because Jewish life has tremendous priority. But specifically when a Jew is taken hostage, we don't overpay, because then that could become a tool they could kidnap more people to get more money. So that's quite a tricky situation. The same applies to a Torah. However, at their actual value, it is our duty to buy them even when the writing is defective. And therefore, you would have to bury them. You'd have to store them away. You still need to redeem them because after all, they're holy. If the non-Jew demands an exorbitant price, we must bargain with him and persuade him to sell at the proper price. If he persists, we should let him keep the objects. Even though it's a discretion of the objects, this is obviously preventing further objects from being stolen. We shouldn't ask him to sell it at a lower price than it's worth or too low, because then he might just get angry altogether and throw them away. So I guess the key criteria for this halacha, the key point to remember, is that one should act with intelligence and not do something that will cause a negative long-term result. And therefore, don't overpay and don't underpay. So try, as in however you can, to bring holy books back into our hands, but not at a cost that will cause more damage than good. Okay, somebody asked about this already a bit earlier. If a Torah fell out of someone's hands, even if it's covered, he must fast. And it is a custom that those who see it fall as well. That actually isn't mentioned clearly in halacha, that those that see it have to fast, but that is the custom, that whoever sees it happening, fast nowadays, not 40 days, but 1 day, which is obviously a terrible thing. This last halacha is quite an interesting one. It is forbidden to write biblical verses without lines. So if you look at the Torah, you'll see that there's lines edged into the Torah. So he's saying that Torah verses shouldn't be written without those lines. Now, practically speaking, the custom is that we are lenient about writing verses of the Torah, even without lines, but only for the purpose of education, of teaching. But otherwise, we don't just write verses if it's not for the purpose of teaching. And one final point, some authorities hold that it's forbidden to write secular words in the Ashuris lettering in which the Torah is written. So Ashuris is that special script that Torah letters are written in. And this is something a lot of people don't know. So let me just quickly show you what we're talking about over here. Ashuris script. Okay, so this is classically the letters of a Torah, right? No, let's go down. There we go. On the top, you have regular block letters, and at the bottom, you have letters the way they're written in the Torah. So since the script of the Torah is holy, we are not allowed to write anything but Torah in the script. So sometimes, for example, people want something to look really beautiful. So let's say you want to have your name written on inscribed on a board, and you want it to look really authentic. So you might want it to be written exactly as it's written in the Torah, but this actually should not be done. So that's something practical. Often I'll see in the Shabbat Shalom Friday WhatsApp messages, something that I wouldn't... it's beautiful messages, but something to be cognizant of. If it's written in Torah letters, then that's not ideal. Since these are such holy letters, they should only be used. This script is exclusive. It should be used exclusively for writing Torah and nothing else. That brings us, I believe, to the end of section 28, which concludes the section of Torah study. Tomorrow we begin, as mentioned, a brand new section of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, a really interesting section. A fascinating and inspirational section which speaks about how we live life and why we live life and what our motivation for life should be. As mentioned at the beginning of the class, today is the 18th of Elul, which is a very auspicious day in the Hasidic calendar. It's the day that the Baal Shem Tov was born. It was the day that he began to teach Hasidus, and it is also the birthday of the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman Aviyati, the founder of Chabad. So since we have 2 minutes left, I am going to share, for those of you that would like to join, a nigun of the Alter Rebbe, and it's quite moving. It's slow, but I think you'll very much enjoy it. This actually is a nigun, I believe, of the Baal Shem Tov, that I'm going to share, which is his birthday also is today.
If you manage a team, you have to try Monday.com. Monday.com is a platform to track every.
Okay. Just a moment. Let me see that the sound is coming through. Okay. Thank you for joining us.
I will be away until Friday, so I may not be in Yeshurim. If it's no Wi-Fi where I'm going to be in the north.
Okay.
Very nice pictures. Facebook.
Ahoy, larai, larai. Ay, laro, ay, laro, ay, laro.
Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.
Shkaya.
Thank you.
Shkaya.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thanks, Rabbi. Cheers, everybody. Bye.
Kaya.
Thanks, Rabbi.
There's a declaration of Netanyahu at the moment.
Regarding the lockdown,
Supposed to be a lockdown. If no lockdown, tomorrow lockdown, you don't know.
Balagan.
Yeah.
Moshe, did you see Netanyahu speaking to that Arab guy? I don't know who he was exactly, the Saudi prince or something. At the end
I
of the
saw it,
video,
but I'm talking now. Supposed to be lockdown on Neighborak and all the Yeshuvim Haredim. In the
I hear
meantime,
that.
it's not happening. Maybe tomorrow, we don't know, but unbelievable what's going on here.
There's a big debate whether the lockdown helps or not.
I'm not sure will help, but you have to stop it because the numbers are running out of control completely.
Sure, terrible.
At the end, it's going to happen that Yom Tov, Rosh Hashanah and everything going to be locked down.
Aye,
It's going to be worse.
aye.
Yeah.
Okay, we should have good news.
We hope for good.
Yeah.
All the best.
All the
If I
best.
don't see you till Friday, then have a good Shabbos. If I have reception, we'll be in contact.
Okay,
Good.
enjoy.
All the
Enjoy,
best.
Mrs.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
How you doing, Greg? I left. He just stays around.